Kimmel's suspension stoking protests south of the border and questions when it comes to free speech and political censorship. Here to dive into the topic is James Turk, director for the Center for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. Jim, thank you so much for being with us. Listen, we are once again being thrust into this conversation about free speech and cancel culture. I want to get your reaction as you do a lot of work in this field here.
Yes, I do. Well, thank you very much for having me. I suggest that what's going on here is not cancel culture. It's not what we've seen where university, there's pressure to cancel a speaker or a public venue cancels a speaker. What's happening here is where the power of the US government is being marshaled by the Trump administration to silence voices it doesn't like. In your intro to this item, there's a reference to the actions of Brendan Carr, who is the head of the Federal Communications Commission, which is the body that grants licenses to television stations and has life and death power over them. And he said, and this is why I say this is very much a state intervention, he said, these companies, referring to ABC, can find ways to change their conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. You know, just a blatant threat that they could lose their license if they don't pull Kimmel. This is unprecedented.
And there are rules and laws when it comes to, the FCC's role here. Would you say that this is an overreach? And just down the line, what would it take to revoke a broadcaster's license in the U.S.?
Well, it is an overreach because traditionally, most of the major regulatory agencies, like the FCC, but also government departments like the Department of Justice, have been very careful to be independent from the president, because they're to be a neutral organization that applies the rules, applies the law. And what Trump has done is he's appointed loyalists to each of the heads of each of these, whether it be the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, or the FCC. And now they're acting as if they're taking their direction from the president, rather than functioning as the independent arbiter over the regulations set by Congress. This is unprecedented.
And I also want to focus a bit on the reaction after Jimmy Kimmel's show was suspended here. The move is being celebrated by U.S. President Donald Trump, who is in the U.K. today. On the other hand, you have critics, including former U.S. President Barack Obama. Part of his statement says he says that this is a dangerous level. He's accusing this current administration of threatening regulatory action, as we touched on, against media companies here, unless they, quote, muzzle or fire reporters and commentators. An action taken like this one here with Jimmy Kimmel, what impact does it have down the line on networks and journalism?
Well, it sends a very clear signal. It has a chilling impact on everyone. I mean, we've seen examples of where Trump has sued ABC, CBS. They've caved to his and paid him millions of dollars, even though they would have won it in court. There's a fear, and in the case of Kimmel, they're the biggest owner of ABC stations in the United States. Is seeking permission from the Federal Communications Commission to merge with another company, which would give it be able to reach 80% of the homes in the United States. So it was very clear it wouldn't get that permission unless it took this action. So this wasn't not an independent decision. This was one directed by the American government in a way that the American government or agencies of the American government have not acted historically.
And Jim, I want to bring it home here with our last question, because everything that happens in the U.S. spills over right here into Canada. So what implications are there north of the border, right here in our country?
Well, it reinforces the need for the independence of regulatory bodies to act in a manner consistent with the law, not to act at the behest of the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office or the governing party. We have to have that tradition, which we've had firmly in Canada. And it could come under threat, seeing what's happened. And we've already seen a decision that was made by Parliament, reversed by the Prime Minister, regarding the funds that the big social media companies had to pay into to help support Canadian content, and he canceled that under pressure from Trump. So there is a danger. I think Canadians can look at what's happening in the United States and resolve not to allow that to happen in Canada.
Okay, James Turk, director of the Center for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. Thank you so much for joining City News 24/7 today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.